It's reserved. We reserve all rights. Disclaimer. The information presented in this film is an entirely speculative hypothesis only. Please take it with a dump truck load of salt. It should come as no surprise that the transhumanism mouthpiece Time magazine was purposely selected to officially announce the Great Reset in late October 2020. You may know it as long-ignored whispers of other names, UN Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, or the Wildlands Project, and even the New World Order, which you were programmed to believe was just a nutty conspiracy theory. Yet there it is on the cover of Time magazine, on your local nightly news.
Today is the first full day of the New World Order. Outdoor gatherings are limited to 2 people. Exercise is allowed, but no further than a 10-kilometre radius from your home. Browsing in shops is not permitted. Only 1 person per household may leave to do essential shopping. And from tomorrow, funerals are limited to 10 people.
We've got to accept that this is the New World Order. We've got to accept that this is the New World Order.
We will be looking at what contact tracing looks like in the New World Order.
You've been asleep. There is nothing new about this world order.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
Its real name is the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And Klaus Schwab, founder of the World Economic Forum, yes, that Klaus Schwab, told us what was in these injections in his books, COVID-19, The Great Reset, and the Fourth Industrial Revolution. But were we paying attention? In this book, he states that the future will challenge our understanding of what it means to be human from both a biological and a social standpoint, meaning the vaccinated will not be the same species as current biological humans, which we will cover shortly. Schwab states that the tools of the Fourth Industrial Revolution enable new forms of surveillance and other means of control that run counter to healthy, open societies. So we will not have a healthy, open society. We will be mind-controlled slaves. Schwab says, at least in this mind-controlled society, public crime is likely to decrease due to the convergence of biometric sensors injected inside of the body, cameras, AI, and facial recognition software like they already have in China. They called this next part pre-crime in the film Minority Report, where you are guilty if they think you might commit a crime, whether you actually commit one or not. Schwab says, as capabilities in this area improve, the temptation for law enforcement agencies and courts to use techniques to determine the likelihood of criminal activity and to assess guilt or even possibly retrieve memories directly from people's brains will increase. Do you know of a technology that can retrieve people's memories? Well, they're putting it into people right now. He says even crossing a national border might one day involve a detailed brain scan to assess an individual's security risk.
Imagine a world without murder.
I lost my best friend.
I lost my aunt.
I lost my dad.
I lost my father.
I lost my wife.
Just 6 years ago, the homicide rate in this country had reached epidemic proportions. It seemed that only a miracle could stop the bloodshed. Within just 1 month under the pre-crime program, the murder rate in the District of Columbia was reduced 90%.
They were going to be waiting for me in the car.
He was going to rape me.
I was going to be stabbed.
Right here.
Within a year, pre-crime effectively stopped murder in our nation's capital.
In the 6 years we've been conducting our little experiment, there hasn't been a single murder.
And now pre-crime can work for you.
We want to make absolutely certain that every American can bank on the utter infallibility of this system. And to ensure that what keeps us safe will also keep us free.
Schwab describes how these technologies can intrude into the hitherto private space of our minds, reading our thoughts and influencing our behavior. It might surprise you to learn that this technology is not new. It has been around since at least 1964, nearly 60 years ago.
Electronic mind control research is not new. A scientific milestone in this area came in the 1960s when Dr. Jose Delgado demonstrated remote control over a charging bull. By connecting a radio antenna to electrodes inserted into the bull's brain, Delgado proved that the animal's aggressive impulses could be thwarted by electronically manipulating the bull's muscle reflexes.
Do you realize the fantastic possibilities if from the outside we could modify the inside? Could we give messages to the inside? But the beauty is that now we are not using electrodes. Could we give messages to the inside? But the beauty is that now we are not using electrodes.
In recent years, Delgado has shown that the behavior of monkeys can be altered using low-power, pulsating magnetic fields. But in these experiments, there were no antenna implants.
Any function in the brain, emotions, intellect, personality, well, could be perhaps modified by this non-invasive technology.
Delgado's research has so far been limited to animals. But in the Soviet Union, a radio frequency, or RF device, has been used for over 30 years to manipulate the moods of mental patients.
Are COVID-19 deep nasal swab tests really implanting electromagnetic transmission systems for remote control, or is that just a conspiracy theory? Why would a cotton mucus nasal test swab need to be so highly radioactive that it sets off danger level alarms, or even radioactive at all? Why would it need to be shoved all the way down your head when a saliva sample would do just fine? And why are they instructed to twist and twist and twist them around inside of you? The big pharma government-controlled media is trying to brainwash the ignorant masses into believing that COVID-19 is the only reason you would possibly lose your sense of taste and smell during flu season. The rest of us all know there are really a dozen common reasons for the loss of taste and smell, from cold and flus to vitamin deficiency, among many others. But did you know radiation exposure and nervous system damage do the same? Why are they forcing you to go have this done every 72 hours to participate in society, or go out and get tested constantly when you aren't even sick?
NYC, you're doing great with wearing masks and social distancing to fight COVID-19. What's next? Get tested often, even with no symptoms. Get tested often, even with no symptoms.
Why are these swabs so brittle that they are nicknamed brain scrapers and brain stabbers? Could they really actually be inserting dust-sized nano-electronic technology inside of people's heads? And could that technology be fractal graphene nano antennas? I was sent a startling research paper from my good friend Max Egan over at the Crow House. Go subscribe to his BitChute channel if you aren't already. That just may answer that question. Again, we need to think critically here. The paper claims to be an analysis of test sticks, meaning nasal test swabs, from surface testing in the Slovak Republic, and confirmation of genocide. An analysis allegedly performed in the months of November 2020 to March 2021 on test sticks in sets. The study was alleged to have been carried out on SD biosensor swabs, Abbott swabs, and Nadal swabs in an unnamed hospital laboratory from Bratislava, Slovakia, claiming the test swabs studied were from the sets used in surface testing in Slovakia and in hospitals. The first questions are, who had the labs and technical capability to do this, and why would they even be doing this? If this study is legit, that narrows it down to a probability that it may have come from the National Institute of Heart and Cardiovascular Disease in Bratislava, or the National Institute of Oncology there, but perhaps it was even St. Michael's Hospital. The second problem is that all of the dozen or so articles on this subject reference the same one paper, which claims to be anonymous. So how does one even confirm this is legit? The study starts by showing how the nylon fibers are broken off at the end of the used test swabs, meaning they are breaking off and staying in people's heads as they are being twisted around by the testers. Also, they are hollow, meaning they can be filled with something, and they are nylon instead of cotton, explaining their brittleness and the nickname brain scrapers. They show a comparison picture of a classic cotton wool swab under a microscope, then show the broken ends of these swabs, claiming their task is to disrupt the surface layer on the mucosa. This could even be in a mouth swab, thereby also their breakage and subsequent leaching or leaking of the fiber content, which they claim is DARPA hydrogel and lithium. These exact threads are patented by DARPA. Next, they show us a side view of a swab fiber with a broken end, and we can see the balls or beads of what they claim to be DARPA hydrogel inside. Then they crushed up the swab fiber into crushed nylon fibers, hydrogel beads, and lithium to show what would be left inside the tested person's nasopharynx, shown here, after the swabs were twisted, broken off, and leached into the tissue fluid. That left them able to get close-ups of the DARPA hydrogel beads that form the content of the hollow nylon test swab fibers themselves. Then they claim to have mixed that DARPA hydrogel with saliva, an organic fluid, and within just a few minutes of being mixed, they began to form rectangular crystal structures, which gradually grew in a fractal manner. After 24 hours of crystallization, this was the end result. Remarkable, as they look very similar to one of the nanotechnologies that the scientists and researchers at La Quinta Columna claim to have found in the Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Janssen, and Moderna COVID vaccines and boosters, which they call fractal graphene nanoantennas. They claim these DARPA hydrogel crystals then created a 3D spatial structure and started to grow throughout the tissues. The reason hydrogel grows and swells is because it is partially made of water and glycerin, which is a humectant, meaning that it promotes the retention of water and also binds water from the body's tissue and fluids to itself. It's kind of like an organic sponge. When Profusa, the Gates Foundation and DARPA teamed up to make the implantable hydrogel biosensor for the upcoming COVID vaccines in 2020, that wasn't the first time DARPA had used hydrogel technology as biological antenna to communicate with external electronic monitoring devices. DARPA and Profusa had already been working on it since 2016 to be used in LUMI for monitoring biochemistry and oxygen levels in soldiers' body tissue.
Hello, I'm Colonel Matt Hepburn. I'm a program manager in the Biological Technologies Office at DARPA. I am an active duty Army infectious diseases physician and have specialized in addressing biological threats that can either be engineered or naturally occurring, such as Ebola or pandemic influenza. Today we're going to be talking about one of the technologies that I actively manage, a company called Profusa, which is aiming at achieving tissue-level continuous health monitoring. Tissue-level continuous health monitoring. Through the SBIR program, we funded them to solve an incredible technical challenge that no one else had been previously able to solve. The key innovation that was presented to us is they said, why can't we make a chemical substance that's really identical to what's underneath the skin, what we call the subcutaneous tissue, so that your body doesn't recognize it as a foreign body response. It just incorporates itself into the tissue. And we have a lot of examples now where a sensor put right underneath the skin can sense things like oxygen and other chemicals that are very important to our metabolism. And not just sense that for a day or a week or even a month, but we imagine that sensing these parameters can go on for a period of years. One of the most important applications to us is so that we can improve the health of our worldwide deployed military force. We feel a strong sense of obligation that if we're going to ask somebody to be deployed and to carry out their mission, that we want to keep them healthy. And this technology will give us a way to monitor if someone is getting sick. We imagine that we would be able to sense that very early and therefore prevent them from getting sick and prevent their complications, allow them to stay healthy and continue to carry out their mission. In addition, if our technology translates into general health benefit, we're very excited about that. So, in other words, we fund those national security applications. The company finds private sector partnership funding for that general health benefit. And we see it as really a win-win as this technology develops.
The paper goes on to show DARPA hydrogel crystals growing under the microscope in the direction of the magnetic field. But they don't say what magnetic field or how they know. They claim that once inserted into the human nasopharynx with a swab, the crystals grow toward the pineal gland due to its local magnetic field being stronger than the Earth's external magnetic field. It is true that the pineal gland both floats in and contains iron oxide magnetite crystals, and studies have been done showing how external magnetic fields coupled with pulsing electric currents can stop the pineal gland from producing melatonin, which this injected technology, 4G and 5G, can definitely do. Is it really just a coincidence that Europe's largest 3D software company, Dassault Systems, has an ad telling us to get prepared for the fourth industrial revolution, showing a machine in a guy's head exactly where the human pineal gland is located? Melatonin connects and syncs us and our biological rhythms with the natural rhythms of our surrounding environment and is vital to our existence. Next, they show us the natural crystallization of saliva without DARPA hydrogel. The crystals do not create 3D spatial models, do not form even rectangular structures, and do not grow in fractal snowflake-type way. Saliva appears to crystallize more like needles on a northern pine tree. Not like this, but here is where things get very interesting. They claim to have taken this 24-hour crystallized DARPA hydrogel in saliva and then added more human saliva with antibodies, and also another sample of it added with ivermectin. In this slide, they claim the effect of human saliva from a human who overcame COVID naturally and has antibodies was added to the left side of the slide and almost immediately caused the permanent destruction of the DARPA hydrogel structures. But they offer zero proof that that was what was indeed added to this sample. We just have to take their word for it. Whatever they added, it certainly destroyed those structures. Another problem with this is that SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19 does not exist outside of a fictional in silico computer model, as we've already established in 13 previous films, and has now also been confirmed to not exist in writing by 159 of the world's top health officials, health authorities and agencies, virology labs, and universities, after Freedom of Information requests were sent asking for proof of any such nonsense as SARS-CoV-2. Even the mighty U.S. Center for Disease Control openly admits that their PCR test does not look for and cannot detect SARS-CoV-2 because they have possession of no such thing outside of a theoretical computer model. And so, this saliva cannot and does not have antibodies from a human who overcame COVID naturally. However, the big pharma bogus germ theory propagators lie about what antibodies really are and do. They do not attach to so-called spike protein bulbs on dead cell debris and neutralize them to fight fictional viral infections. And the real function of antibodies is important to know in order to understand why certain saliva and even people who take ivermectin might be able to destroy these DARPA hydrogel antennae. Like enzymes, globulins or antibodies are simply just Y-shaped proteins, but these release hydrogen sulfide when decaying. As the German virologist and molecular biologist Dr. Stefan Lanka writes, graciously translated to English by Tracy Northern, the increase in antibody titers, meaning amounts, is nothing more than the body's reaction to poisoning from adjuvants. When the body is poisoned by anything, including antigens, which just means a foreign toxin, protein, material, or enzyme that has no business being inside your body, or adjuvants from vaccines, and even acute poisons like ivermectin, holes are torn in the cells by these poisons, and the cells are destroyed. The body's reaction when cells break down is to form sealing substances, globulins, or antibodies, which are small protein bodies that immediately expand in acidic environments, become flat, and cross-link with their hydrogen sulfide groups with other proteins and things. This causes blood to clot, wounds to heal, and they seal these holes in our cells when toxins are injected or ingested into our bodies. These antibodies appear and increase in amounts even after an actual physical trauma or a blow to a muscle or organ tissue, causing a bruise. Our bodies react to this by sealing damaged cells and sealing new growing cells. It's like a house that leaks until the windows are put in and sealed. They call this an antibody, and even a specific antibody, which is not true. The binding property of these hydrogen sulfide type proteins is non-specific. They bind to all sorts of things. You can even manipulate this in the laboratory by changing the acid level or adding detergents that change the mineral concentration to achieve a binding or not. In fact, Big Pharma knows damn well that antibodies are non-specific because they claim the whole point of adding antifreeze, formaldehyde, mercury, and aluminum antigen adjuvants in their vaccines is to poison you enough to shock your falsely named immune system into overproducing mass amounts of antibodies that they claim will later help fight off fictional virus infections. Hoping you'll never say, well, hang on, if antibodies are specific, wouldn't that make my body create specific antifreeze antibodies that don't work against an alleged virus like a virus antibody would? Why are you not just putting only so-called viral material in the vaccines if I only need the one special specific virus antibody? Why would I need to create specific antifreeze and formaldehyde antibodies if your injection is the only way I'd ever possibly get those inside of my body? That is why taking a COVID-19 antibody test is as ridiculous as it is meaningless. Antibodies are not specific to one individual special antigen. If you don't believe me, here you go. This orange does not have COVID, and neither does anyone else. It's just a generic antibody protein detector kit. And though many foods are high in globulins or antibody proteins and fruits are lower, they clearly still produce antibodies as their own cells are ripening and dying after being picked from their nourishing tree. The whole point is, this is not the saliva of a person who overcame COVID naturally and has specific COVID antibodies, because there is no such thing as COVID. But since antibodies are non-specific, clearly the saliva of any toxic person who has antibodies destroys the organic material in this DARPA hydrogel on contact. And since ivermectin is a highly acute toxin, anyone taking it would definitely have massive antibodies in their system, which might be the real reason the governments and media are vilifying it. Could the reason they switched from traditional vaccine technology filled with poisonous antibody-creating adjuvants to this new alleged mRNA technology be because they don't want the body producing antibodies that can destroy their hydrogel antenna technology? Could the reason these so-called COVID mRNA vaccines cause so-called autoimmune diseases be because they have something in them designed to stop the body from producing antibodies so it does not destroy their hydrogel antenna technology? Is that why the FDA refuses to tell ICANN, the Informed Consent Action Network, what the secret hidden ingredient is in the Pfizer shot? In the next slide, the paper claims ivermectin itself was added to the right side of their sample and immediately caused the complete and permanent disappearance of the DARPA hydrogel crystal structures, claiming this clearly shows that ivermectin has an incredibly strong effect against the components of DARPA hydrogel in biological organisms. Again, they have shown zero physical evidence that they have actually added ivermectin to this sample. They could have put Coca-Cola or bleach in there for all we know, and since the study is anonymous, there is zero way to scientifically double-check either of these claims. What is fascinating is this published PubMed study that shows graphene oxide hollow nanocomposite fiber tubes attract and soak up ivermectin, which just may actually destroy them and the hydrogel enzymes inside of them. Which could mean that the real reason our governments don't want us taking ivermectin is not because it cures COVID. COVID doesn't exist, and we already showed you in our last film, Ivermectin, Friend or Foe, what it really does. but it's possibly because their graphene oxide-based technology might attract and soak up the ivermectin, which in turn might just actually destroy their hydrogel-based fractal graphene nanoantennas, rendering their whole internal biometric technology incapable of communicating with devices outside of the body. Next, they compare a slide with normal live red blood cells and then claim to add DARPA hydrogel from the deep nasal test swabs, resulting in a total massacre of the red blood cells. They do not say which of the three companies' swabs they used, SD Biosensor, Abbott, or Nidal, nor show proof that they actually did this, but this is what the paper claims, and claims the DARPA hydrogel forms the blood clots within a few seconds, causing damage and clogging blood vessels. They do not say if they separated the lithium from the hydrogel itself, and though I can't say if lithium causes blood clotting, it is known that it causes heart arrhythmia, hypotension, bradycardia, and edema in people who take it as a bipolar disorder medication. A research paper on PubMed was looking into lithium as a potential treatment drug for COVID-19, but they ditched it, concluding that the treatment with lithium requires continuous monitoring of its serum levels in order to prevent acute toxicity and long-term side effects, most notably the kidney and thyroid, so you probably don't want this shoved deep up your nose. But the question is, why would they be shoving lithium deep up your nose? In the bizarre summary, the paper cites other research papers, saying after spawning a mixture of nylon fiber fragments, DARPA hydrogel remains on the nasal mucosa under the pituitary and pineal glands along with lithium. This mixture immediately reacts with living structures to form crystals that are directionally orientated toward the pineal gland, which has its own electromagnetic field. The shape of the crystals determines the type of hydrogel used. The crystals are conductive due to the lithium contained in it. The crystals can receive the signal from the transmitter to the cell and transmit signals from the cell to the transmitter. They are actually nanoantennas. Lithium is an element that does not occur naturally in humans. It is highly toxic to the pineal gland. In low doses, it blocks the pineal gland, and in higher doses, it can completely destroy it. The pineal gland produces serotonin, a hormone of happiness, and controls human biorhythms. It is crucial for higher brain activity, creativity, foresight, sixth sense, and for social interactions of man, especially with nature. In other words, the pineal gland is what makes us all human, and thus it is the arch enemy of the Fourth Industrial Revolution's goal to turn mankind into hive-minded, transhuman, remote-controlled zombie flesh robots. Half the population is there already and aren't even transhumans yet. They reference a DARPA study that shows DARPA hydrogel is an artificial substance that creates a converter between the electromagnetic signal and a living cell, tissue, or organ that converts an electromagnetic signal from an external transmitter to a signal which a living cell understands and responds to. They were able to control grasshoppers and beetles after hydrogel was injected into the nerve structures, and they were then controllable via radio signals. It is understandable if all of this sounds a little too crazy for you, but you had better wake up. The head of the world's most powerful economic banking think tank did not spend hundreds of hours researching and writing 2 joke books about how this will work. Nor did the World Economic Forum spend thousands of hours planning and creating a meticulously detailed interactive website showing exactly how global governance, corporate governance, blockchain, a new digital economy and digital society, a new financial and monetary system brought in via the fake COVID-19 Trojan horse, and dozens of other schemes will all work and connect to every single thing in this fourth industrial technocratic revolution as some kind of a practical joke. The Great Reset is happening, whether you hide your head in the sand or not. Destroying the pineal gland with lithium and inserting hydrogel antenna into the head with deep nasal swabs is one thing. But how do you hook an entire human being up to the 5G smart grid as a complete monitorable and controllable biological robot? Ricardo Delgado, the founder of La Quinta Columna, and his scientific team explain what they have found to us. The information provided on their website, laquintacolumna.net, is a synopsis of more than 20,000 hours of research working with a multidisciplinary group of scientists after the scientific discoveries in Dr. Pablo Compra's final technical report, which provides undeniable conclusive evidence of the presence of reduced graphene oxide in samples of the so-called vaccines produced by AstraZeneca, Moderna, Pfizer, and Janssen. Their research emerges from both scientific analysis of the materials and observational evidence. His scientific team points out that the technocrats behind the Fourth Industrial Revolution transhumanism agenda have taken advantage of the general ignorance and lack of knowledge of not just the general public, but also the medical and health community regarding matters such as nanotechnology, to carry out this sinister plan of what they call UN Agenda 2030, which is just the first target milestone of UN Agenda 21 for the entire 21st century, the duration of the current modern eddy grand solar minimum, the regular cyclical 100-year ice ages that will change this world beyond recognition by its finish around the decade of 2090. Once again, Time magazine cryptically spilled the beans for those paying attention as to why Bill Gates and the billionaires are buying up all of the desert land in the western United States and building farms there. Of all the things in the world to build in a desert where crops can't currently grow, just around the 33rd parallel. And Time also showed why China and the elites are pumping trillions of dollars into building infrastructure in the useless deserts of the Sahel region of Africa, also around the 33rd parallel. Yes, that 33rd. Because they know the record rainfall landing there now is going to make those deserts the new fertile food-growing breadbaskets during the grand solar minimum, just as it always has been like clockwork during the previous grand solar minimums when it was the breadbasket of the Roman Empire. And it's no accident the Sahara Desert is scattered with hundreds of fairly recent, highly advanced ruins sticking out of the sand. And they do not want us migrating there, so they need to monitor and control us. Have you ever wondered why the governments don't seem to care that they are flooding Europe and Scandinavia with migrants from northern Africa? They are purposely moving them out of northern Africa since that area is going to be thriving after 2030. That's why Gaddafi had to go. He was stopping the North African migrants from coming into Europe. The Kalergi plan is yet another clever smokescreen and diversion from the real Agenda 21. The elites don't give a shit how the races mix in soon starving Europe, because the elites won't be in Europe. They'll be in thriving northern Africa. They're telling you on the cover of Time magazine, but you haven't been paying attention. All of